Welcome to the Touching into Presence podcast.
This podcast is for people who are interested in bodywork, empowerment, and somatic-based practices.
I am Nikki Olson.
I'm Andrew Rosenstock.
We are certified Rolfers.
Collectively, we're trained in various movement and bodywork therapies with an emphasis on somatic awareness and client resilience.
Through conversations, our goal is to share and explore mind-body paradigms to offer empowerment possibilities.
It was a pleasure to be in conversation with Jim Asher today. Jim is an internationally recognized Rolf Institute instructor and practitioner. He offers Advanced Rolfing, Rolf Movement Integration, and cranial sacral therapy. Jim has been a certified Rolfing instructor since 1974. He trained with and assisted Dr Ida Rolf. He also studied spinal mechanics with many DOs, including Philip Greenman, the founder of the Colorado Cranial Institute, and he's a member of the International Association of Structural Integrators. He continues to enjoy practicing in the city of Boulder, Colorado. Nikki and I sat down to talk with Jim and learn some history of both Dr. Ida Rolf and the work she laid out. There are lots of good and largely unheard stories included here. One note is the sound quality did not come out as great as it was us being in person, and I'm still learning how to be in the field. So while we do apologize for this, the quality of content that Jim shares is beyond priceless. You will notice at some points people cheering in the background. This is because there was a street performer outside, not that they are cheering for us. In doing the editing, I decided to keep much of the talk as it was. While some stories repeat and some are circuitous, they are real and as stated from Jim himself, and I felt it important to keep it this way. This is also a longer than usual talk, and it may best be enjoyed in sectional doses. So with that, let's begin our talk.
I'm running around and I was the assistant, and so I had to make sure the tables were up and this and that. Typical Rolfing class, some people don't do anything. They won't even put on a pillowcase, Other people are helpful, and it was an advanced class, and half of them thought, well, I'm here to be advanced, They weren't there to be the help.
Yep.
It's kind of crazy. So, the wound up that we didn't get good audio in that class. I had the equipment, and most of it didn't turn out. But people kept bumping it and stuff,
Well, hopefully today's audio comes out a bit better than that. We'll see. It's our first actual in-person one. We normally do, because we're usually in different parts of the world.
Oh, okay.
But we figured if we're both here.
This is the first time we've actually met in person.
Yeah.
Nice.
We've known each other for over a year now. Well, about a year.
Mm-hmm.
First time we met in person was outside your door.
Okay.
So partly we met because of you. We'll let you think that way. As I told you yesterday, you've been Rolfing longer than I've been alive. His experience in those stories, and so we're both, I think, really honored to be here with you.
All right. So that's how I felt with Ida.
Yeah.
So I basically thought I'd be a psychologist, and I was going to the University of South Florida. I was a little older. I'd already been in the service, and so I wound up they take some business classes, accounting and so forth, just so I have a background. And then I took a marketing class with a man named Bill Williams. And he did a lot of psychology in the class. And so I went to the psychology department, and they didn't like what Bill was doing. They were really in the old Pavlov. There's a guy named Pavlov, there's pigeons pecking and getting rewards and rats running mazes. And that's all they were thinking about in the psych department. This was late 60s, 67, 68, 69. So, Bill taught marketing, but he did a lot of psychology. He said, to understand marketing, you got to really understand behavior. And he would run behavioral experiments in the class. My kids say, sometimes we're going to run a thing today, and he says, we're going to take a break here, and I'm going to do a hypnotic trance. And if you don't want to be in a trance, you don't have to be in a trance. And if you want to be one, you can be one. If you want to leave the room, that's okay too. And he'd do a very mild trance thing, like it wouldn't affect half the people. And then You'd say the really strong people, aggressive, are going to stand next to the door, and the people who are really laissez-faire are going to be leaning over here, and then the people who are wishy-washy will be in the middle. And then people would get up and you'd go where you think you ought to be, and then he would sometimes sneak his wife in. He would introduce her by her maiden name so she could observe us. She had a master's in sociology. So he ran these little experiments. Remember one day this really big guy got up and he was mad in the middle of the class. He started walking towards the dorm. Bill said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm out of here. I'm tired of this garbage." And Bill said, "You're not leaving." And Bill was a little skinny guy, and not super little, but quite. He said, "You're not leaving." And the guy said, "What makes you think I'm not?" He said, "Because you're a really big, strong guy, and if you leave, everybody in here will think you're afraid of me, or afraid of what I'm going to say." So he went right at the guy's, the guy went, "I'm not a coward," so he sent him. He knew if he left, he'd look like he was afraid of what Bill had to say. Not, he didn't want to hear it, but he was afraid of it. I went, damn, that was an interesting manipulation there,
Mm-hmm.
So some people would ask Dr. Williams if they could sit in this class because he would sometimes do these interesting experiments, Anyhow, he liked me. I would look up references and I would go the extra mile for my papers, my footnotes. I would do things that he were outside the box. He liked that. And I liked it. And so he invited, there's a psychology, the Southeastern Association of Psychotherapy or Psychology is meeting here at this university. Why don't you come? I think you'd find it interesting. So he said, I'll put you down as a graduate student. There really wasn't a graduate student, but I was taking some graduate courses. And I said, okay. And I had a beard, and I was a little older because, as I said, I'd already been in the service. I had a little briefcase I walked around with. So I went there, and there was really interesting talkers, and one guy had been to Rolf Institute, and he was talking about California. He had been to the mountains. And he had this other thing. He had done studies at psychotherapy. Every states have these sort of state mental institutions where you send people who are sort of crazy or unrealistic or something. And he thought that they really weren't. He said, realistically, they're undertrained. If you see the psychiatrist maybe once every 2 weeks or once a month, you see a psychologist once a week. He said, we should be training the orderlies and the nurses in psychotherapy so that if they see some odd behavior, they can report it immediately. They don't have to wait 3 weeks to start helping them. And I went, that's interesting. And then, I thought, and he said, by the way, he says, he was talking fast. He said, talk fast because I want to talk about some weird, wild thing that happened in California. He says, in the mountains of California, at a place called Esalen, and this little lady with white hair threw me around on a table of bed for 10 hours. And he said, when I got up, I had to get new shoes, and I had to get a new set of my glasses, my eyes changed. Everybody started laughing. This little old lady's thrown around the table, and he's got to get new glasses and new shoes. And he said, her name's Ida Rolf. It's going to be a big name in psychotherapy someday. And he says she believes in reorganizing the body. People have pain in their body and issues in their body. And so she gives you these hours. Each hour is different. And I'm like, God, I need that, because I'd been in the Marine Corps and whatever, had hard jobs. And I was like, I just felt like my body needed it. And then I could feel I had some emotional tension in my body.
Can I ask, had you had any type of body work before? Like, were you used to getting massage or being touched in any way?
Yeah, I had a massage or two.
Okay.
And when I was in the Marine Corps, I thought about being a corpsman because half of them I thought were half-assed. They didn't care, when it was really bad burn. The guy went at 6 in the morning. I said, I'm badly burned. It in the chow hall, and I was picking up a steam thing, you know. And then I thought I'd be a corpsman, because there'd be a better corpsman than this guy. But to be a corpsman, you had to be in the Navy. And I didn't want to go in the Navy, because if you didn't make it, then you're stuck in the Navy for 6 years. And, I was happy to be in the Marine Corps, and I was also happy to get out. But I didn't want to risk 6 years in the Navy. Anyhow. So I'm looking around, and then I hear this guy, well, that sort of sounds like what I was thinking about, helping people. And so went and talked to Bill about it. He thought it was interesting, and his wife was there. And then I graduated. I went to New York City and thought, that was the other thing, if you can make it in New York City, you can make it anywhere. So I went to New York City, got a job in sales. Wasn't making a lot, but I was, trying to do my New York thing. And my mom died. So I had to go down, went back to Tampa to help my dad out. And I went back to visit Bill. He and his wife had gone to California. So I go to his office and we're talking about it, and the phone rang and I had to leave. I go back to his office, the phone rings again, I leave. Back in the old long distance days, and went back to, every time you've been here, the phone rings. He said, can you imagine, who would you guess was on the phone? He said, every time you're in here, we're talking about Rolfing. The phone rings as Dr. Rolf returning my phone call. So he had gone to California with his wife. He was going to study, I forget who it was, a couple of different people who did interesting psychotherapy skills. And then they said, they saw a flyer on a Rolfing demo with Ida Rolf, so they decided to go to that, and they both really got interested. Bill goes over and talks to Ida and says, hi, I'm really interested in this stuff. I came out here to study psychotherapy, but this is much more interesting. And he said, well, I'd love you to meet my wife, Gigi, and Gigi has her master's degree, and here's my kids. She says, your kids? And he says, well, yeah, I'm on my sabbatical. I'm not here to study. And she said, most guys leave their family home for a year. That's really, I forget, she, an adjective, good, good thing, great, you're a great thing, or something. And Bill went, well, why would you want to bring your wife and kids with you for a year? In California. So anyhow, Ida walked away, and a guy named Al Drucker, who was a physicist, he taught physics at Stanford, was a Rolfer. And the other interesting thing about Ida, all these really brilliant people around her. You wouldn't, your average group. So Al says, do you realize you're in the class? And Bill said, what? He says, she basically said, and she had said something, the class starts Monday, and he thought she was just referring to something. Anyhow, so Bill said, the class says, yeah, be here at 9, it's going to be starting Monday, da-da-da. So Bill showed up, and he got his wife Rolf, and his wife Gigi just fell in love with Ida, and she was she just was one of those wonderfully sweet Southern women that has a master's degree, and started taking care of Ida, bring her coffee and stuff, and then they came back, and so I'm talking to him, and he said, I'm bringing Dr. Rolf down here. So I started getting Rolf by Bill Williams, and then he brought Ida and had her through 3 talks in different towns.
Back in Florida.
In Florida, And so she was happy to come. He realized she liked to swim, so he set her up with 2 of her on the coast so she could go for a swim later, And so I got to hear at the same time, actually, the first time I heard her, John Lodge, who became a teacher, was there. John was a real tall guy, and he did the artwork in her book. And he'd been an art professor earlier. And people would go up to Ida and say, you're supposed to have big hands, or you're supposed to weigh 150 or something. And I was kind of thin at the time, because you're a student, you only eat this much, And that was kind of the beginning of the yoga running thing. So I went over to talking to her. She walks over to John, and he's talking. He's a real tall guy. And she grabs him by the arm, and she lifts his arm up. She says, everybody listen, everybody look at me. This is the kind of hand I'm looking for. And he's like, he's looking down this little old lady shaking his hand, you know. So he goes back to Bill and he says, Bill, do you think she was serious? And Bill said, I've never seen her say that before in her life, you know. So John decided he was going to be a Rolfer. I was already wanting to be a Rolfer. And so then she did another thing in Miami, and I went down there. So she was from New York, and she had her PhD. So I had been to New York. So I'm thinking I need to dress up. It's in Miami, but I wear a 3-piece suit. It's a light wool and a tie.
Way to represent.
And I thought I should be mesomorph. This is ectomorph, mesomorph, and my shoulder, you know, I'm a little skinny. I take my jacket off, I go to another room, and I do handstands. I'm doing push-ups. You know, you get your head, you know, you're foot down, you're doing that to pump up my arms. And I had already started the interview with a circle, and she's sitting there, and Gigi Williams really liked me while I'm your brother, so she had saved me a seat right next to her. And I didn't realize that lady. I walk out, I sit down, you know, trying to be a mesomorph, you know, and Ida leans over and whispers to Bill, she says, this guy may have heart problems. Look how red his face is. Because of what I've been doing. And I was like, oh, red face, you know. And so I'm sitting there, and I would answer questions, and I had the reading list. I had this really long reading list, and I had checked. I'd read some books 3 times. I'd read some books 1 time. Some books I couldn't get, and because some of them are pure biochemistry. And I said, Dr. Rolf. So she asked people that read this book or that book, and I kept saying, yeah, I read it. She said, anybody have their list? And I was the only person that brought their reading list. So I handed it to her. She said, what are all these checks? I said, what's the number of times I read it? And so what does this X mean? That means I want to go back and review it, you know. Like, she saw me as I wasn't planning her seeing my list, so she realized this guy's serious. No one else had even, half of the guys hadn't even read books. So all these guys, she's like, okay, how many people, you know, you got to be a mesomorph, how many people here think they'd be a good Rolfing? So all the guys, you know, men especially, they're all decided to pump up, you know, we like the, so all the guys like, pull their chest up, and, you know, trying to look tough, you know, and she's looking around the room, you know. And she said, what about you? And she says, you're kind of on the skinny side. I think I weighed about 145 at the time. And so I said, well, I decided to play a trick on her. Because I'd been in New York trying to be a comedian. It just came naturally to me. So she said, you're obvious have a lot of fear going on. She said, I want you to look around the room and say who you're willing to fight and who you're really afraid of. And there's one person I'm terrified of. And she says, who is it, young man? Who is it? Spit it out. And I went, Gigi Williams. And Gigi was the smallest person there, the sweetest person there, who was bringing her tea. And she said, you made me laugh. She says, I need you. I need you to keep me laughing. Can you keep me laughing? I said, yes, ma'am. And I really thought I could keep her laughing, but yeah, I was willing to try. And so that's how I got in the class. I made a joke. And everybody else, all the other guys sitting there like that are like, you know, and some of them have PhDs and masters, and now some of them got into class, you know. Mm-hmm. So there was a guy in the group, his name was Hal, I can't think of his last name.
Hal Paris?
No. You wouldn't know him. He's a PhD in Miami.
Okay.
And he was dean of one of the schools at the University of Miami. So Bill Williams had gone down there, and he was Rolfing all the big wigs in Florida in a way. This big psychotherapists, psychiatrists, you know, were interested in the body-mind thing. This is when it was really starting to go. The Humanistic Psychology Association had just started. And we had a Humanistic Psychology Association meeting in Florida, and I can't remember the names, but the big guns from that early days came and talked, you know. People were doing encounter groups and meditation. So,
which is funny because now that's like just common, but at that time of the day,
Yeah, there really wasn't a Humanistic Psychology Association. You couldn't go anywhere to study, but you could be in the early groups. And I'd already been in one encounter group, and so which Bill helped me get in. And so then I got in another encounter group and a Gestalt group, and we made the help off to be a good Rolfer, but also I felt like, gee, I could use that, you know. Mm-hmm. And so. You know, Bill had, meanwhile, was talking about Ida, and she had done 3 demos down there, and he had lined up Hal, this, I can't remember his last name, he had a PhD, and he was in charge of University of Miami. You know, he was dean of one of the programs. His wife was having to fly up to see Ida in New Jersey because she'd been in a really bad car accident, and no one could help her but Dr. Rolf. And Bill had said, you should see Ida, not me. So Bill was gracious enough to refer her up, you know, and so she's up there getting Rolf. It's a long trip, you know, flying back and forth. So Hal is really wanting Ida to come to Florida. And Ida was doing a few sessions, but not a series. So Hal ran around to all the deans at the University of Miami, and like one guy he was dean of the biochemistry department in the medical school, named Gene. He said, Gene, your wife would be really good at this. We could get her in this class. And Hal could tell someone else, you know, you would be really good at this, you know. So Hal filled this class, and he got the University of Miami to sponsor Ida. And there was another school on the West Coast, in Fort Lauderdale, and they wanted to do alpha, beta, theta scans on people. But they weren't as enthusiastic because they didn't offer Ida certain things, you know. And Hal was determined to get Ida down there. So we wound up having a class in Pigeon Key. It's actually an island on the Keys. And it's rented out by the University of Miami. It turned out it was empty for 7 weeks. They weren't using it. They do marine biology research there. They put in nets and study fish mating and stuff. So Ida loved it. So I got I somehow got my interview. I went for another interview, but that was my main one. You know, I made a good impression, and Bill said, "You're in the class." I went, "Oh, great!" You know, so I started studying like crazy. I had gotten some books, anatomy books. I bought 2 or 3 anatomy books. I dropped out of graduate school, started taking massage courses in Miami, and. So when I showed up, I was one of the few people that had actually been studying massage. It was a 1,000-hour course. So I went sometimes in the day in, that's all I had to do. I had a little money, you know. I was living in a boarding house to save money. And I showed up. This class was on Pigeon Key. It was really sweet. You could do swimming.
Sounds lovely.
And Dr. Rolf got up early mornings. She'd take us swim around 6 in the morning. We take turns making sure she got out, you know. And then she'd clean up, and we'd start right at 9 in the morning. And then she'd give us a break, and sometimes the break was long, and you could get a little swimming in, sometimes we'd go to 7 or 8 o'clock at night, because Hal was saying, would you like more models? So we had a model of a guy, he had no control of his arms, he had lost control of his arms, so we had to swing him, and we had, I can't remember, that's just, and for a while we had no black people as models, so I was like, oh, wow, what's going on? So all of a sudden they went out and put out the university, all of a sudden they got 4 people down there, young men and women of color to be models. And there's a little boy with cerebral palsy. If you look in our book, there's a boy with curly hair. He was a model. He had cerebral palsy. And there's another boy, he was all twisted. And we're like, how can this little guy look like this? Well, his dad was a maintenance man on the island. And we brought his dad in one day. So his dad had been in a bad car accident, so this was his dad. So his son was actually mimicking his dad. He really had, So I just said, we got to Rolf the dad if we can get the kid to want to own a new body. So we worked him in. So we had lots of extra models. We would sometimes go to 7, 8 at night. A little meal break. And it was tag team after a while. People say, man, I'm exhausted. You come over and do this person's hamstrings for me or something. So it was fun. We did have two groups. You had the practitioners and the auditors. I was an auditor, but I helped practitioners because some of them.
Can we rewind a little bit or just answer this question in terms of timeline? So this whole training that you're experiencing in Florida.
It was 1971.
And then so when, was that then before Esalen and when she had her whole group of Esalen?
Right. So
learners?
I had already done a class in California, and that's what the one Bill was in.
Mm-hmm.
And she had done another class, but they were smaller classes. So I met a couple of people that did in one class. It was just 4 people. And I was at Esalen, and I didn't. But 2 of them didn't stay with it. One guy he was a Gestalt therapist and really good. And he said, I like it, but I really want to stay with Gestalt. He'd had some training with Fritz Perls, and he had big hands, and he had the structure to be a great Rolfer. But I mean, he really turned into be an amazing therapist. So he made the right call there. He was trained right with Fritz, and he really had that Gestalt thing going. And that was the early days of Esalen when you could get some really good trainings with bright people.
Mm-hmm. This is a fun story because I don't think, or at least I know in my 20 plus years of training, haven't really heard much of Ida training in any other places extensively other than Esalen.
Right. So there's another place there. It's called a Cilium. I'm not sure I'm saying it right. It was like Esalen, but it wasn't on the cliffs. You ever been to Esalen?
No, but I'm familiar with that area.
Yeah, Big Sur, but there's cliffs there and hot tubs, and it's incredibly beautiful. And so Ida was there, and she was working there a little bit. And so she worked with the 3 founders. And one guy was just so in love with her. I mean, he called her grandma. I mean, she let a few people call her grandma. She didn't like it. She didn't know you. And she would work with one guy had been hit by a boulder, and he was just all twisted, and she got all the twists out. And then like I said, Bill, she was doing smaller classes, and Bill got into one. And I wasn't in one of those, but I was early on, 71. And, so this was she liked the Florida class because there were 3 psychiatrists in it. There were 3 doctors. I can't hear names right now. Carl, Mama said he's retired, but he was often and did psychiatry in Washington State. Another guy, he went back to psychiatry after a while because he moved from Florida to California. In California, you could do anything, tickle therapy and stuff. So he decided, hey, psychotherapy is actually easier than Rolfing. So he went back to being a psychiatrist because in California, with that license, you could do well. Mm-hmm. But there was another guy in the class. He was a psychologist, and he started bringing. His name was Tom West, and he stayed with it, and he convinced a lot of students in St. Petersburg to go study Rolfing, or at least get Rolfed. But in that class, there was also a woman. She was an anesthesiologist. Her husband was a ear, nose, and throat surgeon. And she decided to give up anesthesia, which pays well, to be a Rolfer. And she was an amazing good Rolfer. She was small, but I used to get session with her because I was always thinking I was big and strong. And then I get the session from her, and she was half my size, and she would do this amazing work on me. So it was a good feedback for me to realize, okay, I don't have to be doing this,
So would you say her touch was lighter, or she was just...
Yeah, lighter. And she would just get into the fascia and move the fascia. In the early days, I sometimes was in my head, wasn't right, but in my head I was going to get the deep layers for people quicker. Mm. Therefore, I was helping them more. Well, really, it wasn't helping because it's about organizing the layers. Mm. But in my head, the deep work's where the stuff was. Because that was true of my body. I had a lot of emotions on my deep adductors and brought out a lot of anger and sadness. And, my second, seventh hour when they went in my head, a lot of things came out. In the third session in my head, more stuff came out. So I was projecting my experience on other people with the deep work. But then Jan would go, "Why are you working that hard? You can't do this to me." She said, "I want to have you work on my boyfriend." And she'd bring in some guy, have me work on him. Then she'd work on me. I'm like, damn, she's getting a lot done. And she's, not working, going deep. So that was Jan Davis. Her name was Davis. As I say, she really helped me. And then we would bring Ida down, and Ida loved Jan and her husband. And Jan had a beautiful little house. It wasn't big, but it was on an inland waterway. And she'd give Ida her own room, and Ida could go. Ida loved to swim. Ida grew up. We started talking about it. When I was in New York, she would call me. I was working in New York City. She'd call me up and ask me what I've been doing. I said, "Oh, I was sailing this weekend." She'd say, "Well, where are you sailing?" She said, "Well, I used to sail there." "What kind of boat?" Talk sailboats, and so I got to be close to her because we had similar. I did things that she liked, and she liked Ron Thompson a lot, and she liked the outdoors. So Ron had a diving school and was an phenomenal swimmer. So I would start coming out of Florida. He would take her out in a boat. He would take her into the swamps and show her catch fish and show her gators and stuff.
And so you're kind of bouncing between Florida and New York.
Yeah, so after I was Rolfing for about a year and a half, Ida asked me to move to Chicago. I drove to Chicago 2 or 3 times. Didn't like it. It was just weird to me. I said, "Well, I've lived in New York City before." I said, "How about that?" She said, "That sounds..." So then I moved back to New York. Right after college, I'd gone to New York to kind of try it out. And then, like I said, my mom died, so I went back to Florida, and that's when I got in with Ida because she just started coming down. First time I was in New York, I tried to get a hold of her, but it just wasn't making the connection.
With the training in Florida, where you were an auditor,
right?
Was there only one time when there was that Florida program, or did that happen a few times on the Pigeon Key?
No, we didn't have one more in Pigeon Key, but the next class we had was on a lake. It was a Presbyterian in those days churches would have a place to take, have summer programs and stuff. So it was kind of a there was a psychologist, and Tom West, he hooked it up. It was a beautiful lake, and had cabins and stuff, and Ida had her own little place, and so Ida had a class there, and they had canoes. And
so is that where you did the practitioner portion?
Good question. I can't remember that.
Because I know when I talked to you before, you were going to California, to Esalen as well. Was that before you were living in New York, or is that...
No, I lived in New York, but as soon as I graduated, I'd already heard about Rolfing, but I couldn't find Ida, so there was this thing, if you could make it in New York, you could make. So I'd gone to New York, and I kind of forgot about Ida a little bit, because I was trying to get a job in marketing. And my degree was in marketing, but I'd taken a psychology course. Bill taught marketing. They did all these psychology experiments.
I mean, because you said you went back to New York. You said Ida had asked you to go to New York to make Rolfing.
So I was up there, then I was in this class, and then I went back to Florida on Rolfing, and she says, "We're not developing." Everybody was still on the West Coast, and a few people in Florida. So she came back. She was doing another class in Florida, and I was kind of the errand boy. I'd bring her stuff down. And I brought a lot of models down. I said, "You got a chance to be Rolf right in front of Dr. Rolf, So people were like, "You really?" I go, "Yeah, it's unbelievable." So I got a lot of models for class, and then she'd call me up and say anything. Like once she wanted some rare Jewish wine. It's like I had to go to 3 different places to find it, you know. It was like some kind of liqueur or something. But, you know, Bill was helping out, but he was also, you know, he had a practice and he'd already helped with 2 classes, you know, and so, you know, I was running interference for her, doing this and that, and so she said we could really use someone in New York. So I had already been to New York once. I went to New York once trying to be a comedian, see. So I'm like, okay, I'll go back to New York. And I had friends there. So I went up there and I talked to Rolfer. I'd helped another guy become a Rolfer. And he was in New York. His name was Michael Blackburn, I think. And so I said, yeah, Dr. Rolf would like me to move to New York. He said, I'd love you to come up here. So I went up there. He set me up with 20 clients. I was like busy the first week. Wow. People were just dying to get Rolf. I mean, I was turning away people. So I went up there. He helped me find an office and a place to sleep, and started Rolfing people. You know, people wanted the experience of it. They wanted.
Was this in Manhattan, in the city?
Yeah, I worked on West 74th. That's where I wound up having a really nice office for 5 years. But before that, I worked in West 46 or something. Mm-hmm. I was always on the west side for the most part. But I had clients come over from the east side. Mm-hmm. Just cheaper on the west side to either find an apartment.
Yeah. Oh, that's changed.
Yeah. But I was on West 74th. I wound up getting a really nice place. I'd still be there now. Kept it.
This was the early 70s?
70s, yes. I was up there. I went back to Florida, and then I was up there 74, 75, and I said, and then my mom, or 73, my mom died. I went back to Florida. I'm in New York. In Miami, Florida again, and helping Ida a little bit, and then I just did better in New York. Mm-hmm. I was in a better atmosphere. My old friends, in Florida were all drinking beer and getting loaded and, smoking dope. And I don't want to smoke dope and get loaded. Mm-hmm. And I was in the meditation. I was doing, I'd gone and studied meditation. I was trying to meditate twice a day for 20 minutes. And you can't smoke dope or a glass of wine at night. Keep that up. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be conscious for my clients, because I already started. And even before that, I was going to massage school, and I knew I had to be clean.
When you were living in New York, were you going back to Esalen as well to learn with Ida?
Right. So I went to New York, but I was in touch with her the whole time after I got to New York. So she would call me up and say, Laura Pearl's called. She wants to send you people. I told her that you didn't do psychotherapy because Laura Pearl's she had a training group for psychiatrists, and I'm not going to name. She had sent to 2 other Rolfers, and they would try to do their form of psychotherapy on people. Drive these psychiatrists crazy. They didn't want some Rolfer doing their brandish gestalt on them. So I said, she said, I hear you don't do psychotherapy. I said, no, ma'am, I do straight Rolfing. She said, I'm going to send you some people, but I'm holding you to her word. And I said, you got my word on that. And all of a sudden had 6 psychiatrists getting Rolf. And I didn't try to work on their issues. That wasn't my job. And they appreciate that because they had someone else to work with that. And so then I had another psychotherapist, and he liked the fact that same thing. I wouldn't. The other 2 Rolfers in town weren't bad people, but they were trying to add in their brand of therapy. I even told one guy, so we're friends, I said, some people like it without, and he just looked at me and said, well, Jim, you're not trying to tell me what to do. I said, no, your practice is your practice. I wasn't trying to tell. It kind of was, but he was probably good at adding the 2 things in. Mm-hmm. So Ida would call me up and say, Laura Pearl's so we talked, and she'd say, what'd you do? I'd say, I was up sailing so-and-so. She'd, what kind of boat were you sailing? Oh, I used to sail those, And she'd, where were you again? I'd tell her, oh, I like that place. The water's even or something. And When I first met her, I didn't know we both liked sailing, we both liked swimming, but I didn't know that. So we would actually have personal talks, not like, I have headaches at night because of whatever, just human things. Mm-hmm. And then she really liked Ron in my class. He had this diving school. When the first class in the Keys, he had promised her lobster every night. Well, the class was in October, breeding season. It's illegal to take the lobsters out because they're creating eggs. Mm. So every day he apologizes, Dr. Rolf, I can't get those lobsters. Right now it's breeding season. I can get fined you could get thrown in jail really if they caught you with them. She said, it's okay. She thought the whole thing was funny anyhow. She just wanted to get Rolf or so she really liked Ron. Ron and I were doing work. In those days, you took a Polaroid, before and after. And half the people there didn't want to do a damn thing. So at night, I'd go in there and I'd vacuum the rug. And Ron had always photographs, before and after each session. And Ida won. Everybody she had extra models. She had 3 extra models, so she was doing 5 models. And, she won, because this is all being processed by the university and there were psychiatrists in the class. She was adding extra models. We were all happy about that, but some of them would go late. So, I just realized I would do whatever needed to be done. But a hurricane came and everybody left but me and Ida and me. And so I would go there. I mean, it's really pouring down. Pouring down. The winds are coming, and I'm walking over there. She says, who is it? I said, it's Jim Asher. She said, well, come in out of the rain. What are you doing? I said, I just make sure you're okay,
It's nice, because when I talk with you about Ida, you make her sound really nice and sweet, and a lot of the stories are of this, the wicked witch with the white hair, and that she was really gruff and strong and mean.
I was never gruff to me. But there was actually 2 kinds of students. There was those who were really happy to be with Dr. Rolf and loved her, and there was those who were sort of the macho guys. They wanted her to say, wow, you're so strong, look at what you're doing. They wanted, I don't know what they wanted, frankly. They thought they should be in Superman comic books or something. I'm surprised they haven't created their own comic book series. Because it was ridiculous. They would start arguing about, I remember I went to California once. She said, can you come out and help me for a week? And there was another Rolfer there who became a teacher. And he was arguing about every little thing. And I said, what? And he got mad at me because I was nice to her. He barely talked. He was always like, I was always thinking, man, we're going to have a showdown someday, He had this all kick your ass thing, well, I don't really think so, but let's not go there,
It sounds like he could have used some Rolfing.
I wasn't afraid of it, but I thought this I knew it wasn't what Ida wanted. He and I having it out in the parking lot, But, and then other people who loved her, but they didn't really want to be a teacher, and then she tried to, Ida had picked some women out early. She had Dorothy Nolte helping teach. She had Stacy Mills. They were an early group. She had another woman named Adija in LA, and she would send you. She'd say, well, go see Adija. She can help you with this or that. So I went to see Adija, and Adija really helped me with mouth work and nose work. My mouth work and nose work were horrible compared to what I learned from Adija. She, one afternoon, just totally changed my work.
Can you speak a little bit to that of what, if you could kind of highlight some lessons?
It wasn't because I didn't teach her right, but she only had so much time in the class. She only had all these people around her. And models, too, were trying to, can you look at my husband? He needs this or that. Not that that's bad, or my kids could have bad legs. Which was good for me because I would help Ida with stuff. She had me working early. As an auditor, I started working. Because some guys, I don't know what was wrong, but they weren't helping out. Yeah, with Adhesia, I said, my nose work, I've been told my nose work is rough on mouth work. So she's, yeah, you're probably going in there. She's, I don't know if I did her nose work, but she did it. And she was, here's her problem. She says, you're thinking about going in and creating space. She was, you have your fingers like a worm. It's just going to worm its way in. It's not a drill. It's a worm. It's going to go in there, and she has a different word. It's like a fish. It's going in there, and it's going to find its way. And then she said, you're not making all the work on the way in. You're not moving bones around. You're going in there slowly. You're finding the path. She says, on the way out, you're going to make some more changes. So on the way out, just find the fat, feel the fascia, and pull slightly. So I went in there with totally like a softness that I had not thought of before. I wasn't trying to be mean before, but it wasn't that softness. And
it sounds like maybe the point of differentiation of the work is that the work is going to happen more as you're exiting the nose versus going into the nose.
Well, if you're going to go in, but you're not making, that's not your object to make the change. And then she says, you go in, you'll find things, and it'll be tight here and tight there. And she says, on the way out, you're going to feel the fascia and give it a little, just a very, very gentle tug. Mm-hmm. And the way out, I could actually feel like I was pulling on the fascia without, or I could feel the fascia on the inside without hooking into it. I wasn't, you know, I was much more, 10 times more gentle than I've ever been. And so I was like, wow. And she did it to me on the way out. I could feel her changing things as she was coming out. Mm-hmm. But not hurting so much. She just had that way of hooking in and then, you know, giving us. So it was like my buddy Chuck Seamers, he was a Rolfer. He had turned me on to Adhesia. And I said, I had a session with Adhesia. And I went, oh, great. She's one, you know. I had this early group of women, Adhesia Lawless, Stacy Mills, Dorothy Nolte. I got over here. She was a DO.
I feel like I should share with our listeners who might not be familiar with the 10 series that there's a classic session where Rolfers go into the nose and mouth.
Right. You only do it until 10 because the person's not ready for it. And then also you have to have that relationship.
Exactly. Without
the relationship. Now I've done it on a few people. Maybe because it was someone's brother or sister and there'd been a fight, whatever. I go, okay, I'll work in there, I'll straighten it out. But it's not, you really ought to get the series and then come back and get the head more balanced. Because you're working on the inner part of the cranium and affecting everything way back in the head. And so it's much better if the system's more open. But you can do it. Well, I mean, once you understand the territory, you can do a little fix-it work. Like I have kids come in, I don't give them a 10 series, but I go, man, we got to get that palate going. Mm-hmm. So I do the vomer, the palate, I do a maxillary release, but it's a more cranial approach, which is what Rolfing was. Ida wasn't rough in there. Mm-hmm. So back to Florida, Ida did a demo in the east coast of Florida, and this woman had this really kind of slightly strange looking head, and she was in politics. She was not the mayor, but assistant mayor or something. And I had to work with this guy, and he had a really collapsed chest. And they got me put a shirt on. The shirt didn't fit. You could tell the shirt went this way, and his shoulders went that way. And everybody's like, "Damn, look, his shirt doesn't even fit anymore." It was unbelievable. He really collapsed that like that, you know. He was like this, and all of a sudden he's like this, you know. So I mean, people that come up and say, "You have sessions with Dr. Rolf," and I go, "Yeah." And they go, "Give me your sessions, give me your sessions." And I'm literally pulling my clothes trying to get my sessions from him. It's crazy. And then I did this one big thing was a movement. She had a big place, and we all laid down, and I helped her because I had already had one Rolfing movement session. So she was trying to do the arm rotations and stuff. And there was a famous movement people, a woman in the room, I like her name, and she was famous in Miami. And I did the foot, the toe hands, the one leg, and then the arms. And this lady jumped up and she said, I'm split. And she felt like, one was half was alive and one was or something. She ran out, we had to run out and try to grab her and bring her back, We were worried about her. Mm-hmm. We got her back and laid her down and did the other side, But in that class, like I said, people were just watching I teach movement. And they were like, I got to get this. And then
with the you mentioned there were a few females earlier on with Adesha and Stacy. What happened? I know Stacy continued on. I had never heard of Adesha before you mentioned her yesterday.
Well, Adesha didn't really want to be a teacher. She helped people. She helped Emmett. I sent Emmett to Adesha. Emmett was all nervous and sweating. He sweat a lot when he got nervous. He's a wonderful guy and brilliant, Made a lot of money, and he was early in computers. And I just said, well, you should go see Adesha or whatever. And so she, Adesha worked with him, and she's much, she's one of those women you want to be around. So she's just a really soft person and very charismatic, but in a soft way. And I said, well, why do you think I teach? Well, I help people out. I don't need to do that. Mm-hmm. She was busy and she continued all that chaos of a class.
She continued on Rolfing?
Yeah, she Rolfed until she passed away. Mm-hmm. I called her one of Ida's angels. I had 5 women that she would refer to. Stacy, Adesha, Dorothy Nolte. She asked Dorothy to come down and help us. Dorothy Nolte was Rolfing up in Philadelphia. An amazing Rolfer. She came down to Miami and worked on a client that I'd been working on. She had her basic and advanced. Dorothy did one session, took before and afters, and I looked at her and went, I don't believe this. She got all these changes that I hadn't gotten in 5 advanced sessions. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I was like flabbergasted. But Dorothy trained early, and Dorothy wasn't, she'd get in there with her nails a little bit, but this girl complained, she used her nails on me. I said, well, yeah, she's smaller, but look at all your changes, Dorothy had the eye, she had a better eye than I did, by far. So Dorothy came down, we had her do a movement class with us, we all laid down, and she had us sensing this and sensing that. We were all blown away by her. We all wanted to move to Philadelphia. And Dr. Rolf recommended us to us, she said, you should bring Dorothy Nolte down here. But Dorothy didn't really want to do the big scene with auditors. See, in those days you had auditors and practitioners. Mm-hmm. Practitioners were practicing, auditors were asking questions, and it didn't appeal to her at the time. Mm-hmm. Later on, she started teaching a few classes for Peter. Peter asked her if he'd help out a little bit. But I don't know about Adesha. I mean, I asked her about it once. She said, oh, no, I'm happy here. Because the early classes were chaotic. I'm not going to name names, but some guys were wanting to fight. They were like, I'm more macho than you. And guys were smoking dope on Sunday and coming in a little stoned on Monday. It was really, you're like, what? I can't believe it. I never walked in once. Ida asked me to come out. I walked in and someone was dealing lids in the waiting room. Now, I'm not against it, but I want, if we'd gotten busted, it would have made the whole class look bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, use your head here,
Yeah.
Meet him down the block or something. He wasn't a bad person.
And that would have been held at Esalen, those classes, or are they?
That particular class was in California, what at Esalen. So I did classes, like we had one, I forget who organized it, but it was in a high-rise. We had a basic on the 5th floor, and Ida's on the 6th floor, or something like that. They rented 2 apartments, and Ida taught an advanced class. She had me teach the basic. And then people really wanted to hear her. So I said, okay. It made sense to me. So I would take my basic class up, they would hear her lecture, and then they'd come back down. And sometimes they'd go, God, we got to watch your demo. I go, okay, you know. Again, I didn't see myself as anywhere near right, and I wasn't. So then we'd come down and say, we got to catch up a little bit, and they were all fine with that because they got to see Ida and hear her. And then I'd ask Ida if my father could come out to watch it. And I'd done a lot of stuff for her, so she said, sure. So my dad sat into a class for about a week, and he listened to some of her lectures. And he's quiet, so, you know, he wouldn't, you know. And he went, you're doing a great thing here or something. And it's funny, in that class had one guy, he had been wrought by Ida's son, who had really big hands and could go deep fast, but he had these huge mushroomy hands. And his name was Dick. Dick could get deep fast, but he just had that, you know, and this guy's Rolfer student was going deep like Dick. And people were like, yeah, and jumping up off the table. And I had 6 tables in there, and I heard this scream. And I literally jumped over a client on a table to get to the table where the scream came from. And when I got 2 seconds to get there, there's an emergency. I jumped over people. I said, what's happened? And the guy goes, I forget his leg or something. I looked down, and he had gone so deep into the ankle that it messed up. So I went, stay away, and I grabbed it, and I could see it immediately. Just lucky, you know. And in those days, you were right, your eyes got better and better, you know. So I went down, I put it together. I said, don't touch this now. And he said, well, how? Don't fix it. Show me how. I said, no, you're in the wrong space. I said, I'll show you later, but right now you're taking things apart. Mm-hmm. And and that was some people have that idea. You take them apart in the first 7 and put them together in the last 3, but you really didn't. It wasn't about taking them apart in the first 7. It was about opening. I said, no, we're opening. You're the superficial fashion. Some people have that hard time, and I did too at first, because you're thinking the deep fascias where the good stuff is. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned Ida's son. Can you, with your relationship with Ida, can you share a little bit what you know about her family life? Because I feel like we don't know much about, his sons.
Right. Okay.
But where's the husband?
So Ida...
Was he with her when?
I got you. So Ida, after a while, I met almost everybody. Mm-hmm. So Ida would have her son was Dick. She had 2 sons. So Dick was the biggest, and he had big old hands because he started helping Ida sometimes on the weekends. She'd say, what's going into this guy's hamstrings? His name was Dick Dimmerly. Ida's other son was Alan Dimmerly. And Alan say, no, Mom, I got studies to do. I'm going to be Alan's, backtrack a little, Ida's father was an engineer. And she explained to him why she wanted to get her master's in biochemistry and why she got her PhD. She said, men don't take me seriously, I'm a chemist. He went, okay, so he gave her the money to go through the program. In those days, women didn't get these scholarships.
Right.
So Ida got her PhD at Columbia, and her dad helped her. And she said, when I told my dad what I needed, he got it right behind me. That's how she said it. When I told my dad what I needed, he got it right behind me. I went, okay, you know. And she didn't want you to have any misconceptions about her dad being a bad. He was a good guy. And so that's where you need to, she had the support from her dad to get an education. So she married a guy. She married Walter Dimmerly. Walter was an engineer, and they had been buddies, and they did some camping together before they got married. She wanted a guy who liked outdoors, and she loved being, studying enzymes and stuff, but she didn't want to do enzymes 7 days a week. Ida's dad taught her how to swim and sail. I told you we talked about sailing. We talked about boating and swimming. This is kind of why she liked coming to Florida. We would always set her up on the beach where she could swim, or we'd have her near the beach. And we'd say, You want to go to the beach, we'll give you a ride. Sometimes she wanted to drive. She wasn't a good driver. So we were trying to give her a ride as much as possible. I'm not saying she was a bad driver, but...
Yeah. Who doesn't like to be chauffeured?
Yeah, and so, we'd set her up in a nice place near the water. And she loved Jan Davis' anesthesia, so she had a little pool in the back. And the pelicans would come drink out of the pool. I had just got a big kick out of that. But Jan said, you want to go to the beach? We'll drive you over there, whatever you want.
So her husband...
Back to that, so she married an engineer named Walter, which kind of fit. Her dad was an engineer. And they did a lot of camping. So one day, I had asked him what I was doing. I said, you went to Alaska for something. I flew up to Calgary. She said, I went up there with Walter. She said, you went over to, I said, yeah. I said, they have a place near there called Lake Louise. She said, yeah, that's where we started from. I said, you started there? She said, yeah, we went over to Lake Louise, to Western Canada. She said, then we got a guide, and what they used to call him a manservant, but it was a helper. She said, an assistant. And we had horses and mules, and we went up this trail for 3 or 4 weeks. And I figured out later it was the old Alaska Trail. There was a trail from Banff, which is out west of Calgary. It went up into Alaska. She said, we went up for about 6 weeks, turned around. So I said, you fly back? She says, in those days, young man, you went back the same way you came, or you came back the same way you went. And I'm like, that's my That was always my answer. But she wasn't scolding me. She was just saying that you didn't just jump in a plane, So her and Walter, her husband, loved to camp. And so she would take her kids camping and sailing. Like her son Alan told me, oh, yeah, Mom always had a sailboat. And Alan always had a sailboat. And so she and I would talk about sailing, Mm-hmm. And so I knew she had sailed with her dad. And Alan, I think she gave her boat to Alan. But I remember one day, I forget where I was. I met someone who knew Ida. Some big hurricane was coming, and Ida went down to move the sailboat. And all by herself, she didn't have anybody to help her, so she had to cut it loose, and she got the sails down, and she had to move the sailboat from one place to another, so she didn't want to get ripped up with the oncoming hurricane. The guy said, I couldn't believe it. There's little ladies out there moving the sailboat around, and I thought she'd needed some help. The sheriff. He said, so I can come back with some people, and by the time he got back, she'd moved the boat. So Ida was a very strong, determined person. But, so she had that strength already from sailing and swimming. And that's what she liked to talk about. Her and her husband went this long, it was a 3-month trip up in Alaska and back. And she said, my husband got off the horse and twisted his ankle. She said, maybe that's when Rolfing started. She said, I knew I had to fix that ankle or we're going to have a miserable trip. Okay. So these little stories would come out of her as you were talking about where you had been or what you had done. It would remind her of something she had done. She didn't naturally just sit down and brag. Mm-hmm. And we were out here teaching. I brought my Volvo wagon out. She'd say, I heard about a certain road. And so I would take her riding. In 73 was a tenth of the people are now. Maybe not even that. It was a very small town. You get up the mountains here and there weren't other cars, So she'd like going down and she'd say, stop, go back there. Pick that blue flower for me. I'm like, oh, you're going around a curve, you're not looking at blue flowers. And I picked out, I just brought her flower back, and she says, when Walter would pick me a flower, he always left the leaves on. Oh, yes, ma'am. I said, I'll leave the leaves on next time. She wasn't mad.
Had Walter passed now? Or?
Yeah, but Walter had already passed away. I'd never met Walter.
Okay.
Sort of, I hadn't met her. So she called me up in New York, Rolf. She said, would you come down here? I need you to come down here and help me with Dick. He needs some work. I said, okay. I'm thinking I'll come down Saturday morning. I was in New York. She was in Black Hawk, New Jersey or something. But this time she had a little teeny apartment, but it was right next to the woods. So I went down there, I got a ride, and she said, let me show you. And sure, you came out of her apartment. It was kind of like a separate apartment, almost like a cottage. You went 10 feet, and there was this beautiful little trail into the woods, in kind of New Jersey woods. She said, I just love it. I can walk out my door, go down, I can find these trails and get lost and come back, you know. This is probably when she was like 81, 82. And I went, oh, yeah, this is nice. And all of a sudden she said, well, I probably won't be back this Sunday, but Dick will be here in the morning. And she said, I want you to give him a good session, and I hope you don't mind. What? She had her bags packed. She was making herself at home, fluffy there. So I wasn't expecting that, but I had left my plate clean kind of, you know, I told people I was going to see Ida, so I didn't schedule anything for a couple of days because I didn't know what was going to happen. Well, the next day, her son came over, Dick. You know, the other one, she had two sons, I said, and so I worked on Dick, and he was happy. His shoulders were buggy, you know, and so forth. I worked that day, and we were buddies. And Dick felt like he could tell me things without me telling other people. It wasn't anything deep, you know, I mean, like just working hard. He was married to a woman. His wife's name was, I forget right now, but I knew his wife. He had 3 kids. He named one of his sons Rolf. See, I had married a guy named Dimmerly, Walter Dimmerly. And so, but she kept, because her PhD was in Rolf, she kept her Rolf name because she wanted to say, I have a PhD, don't get in my face.
Absolutely.
When people would get in her face, she didn't like it. She would challenge him. Once she was in this big auditorium, maybe 500 people, and this guy kept after her about it. Why don't you use anesthesia? And he'd raise his hand and say, you haven't answered my question. If it hurts, you should use anesthesia. And this was the 3rd time he brought this up. And she started twiddling her thumbs, which was not a good sign. And she says, tell me, young man, you seem like a very learned young man. What is your expertise? And he said, well, I'm a urologist. She said, oh, the kidney. And I said, oh, no. She said, so then you understand sodium and potassium. And you also understand the Krebs cycle, you know, and sodium goes up, potassium goes come down. She said, well, there's that one point where they flip. They go up together and come down together. And she says, can you explain that little part to me? He goes, well, she says, that's okay. Sit down. I'll tell you. If you can't figure it out, I'll tell you later. He's in front of 500 people. But see, he had come after her 3 times. And she went, I've had it with this guy. Tell me what, you're an expert. What is your expertise? And then she just went right for the, you know, you try to embarrass me, I'll show you who's smart and who isn't smart.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw her do that except for the one who was really on her, trying to belittle her in some way. Once I saw her, another psychiatrist, he was constantly coming in with an entourage. He'd written a book. It was a good book. It was a hot big seller anyhow. And psychotherapy. And he would come in with 3 or 4 beautiful men walking behind him or with him and other people. And he was constantly interrupting her lecture and asking her a question. And one day he just had it. And she said, I have a question for you. I can't remember the question, but it was a personal question. It sounded benign. There was like a wolf in sheep's clothing. She slid him this little question and he went, that's not a fair question. And he started crying. And when he asked the question, it didn't sound, but I heard it. I went, oh, she slipped in the question because I'd seen her do this once or twice. She's looking in there and saying, I'm tired of this guy interrupting me. He's trying to embarrass me. I'm tired of it. And she just had this intuition of what to say. And then she almost never did this. You had to really get in her nerves. And this guy started crying, and it sounded like a perfectly simple question. can't remember it, but I'm like, okay. I could tell there's a little personal trail in there. And when that guy started, she said, it's okay, we all have emotions, we all get upset, take your time, someone get him a handkerchief, some can lean extra, and we should have a break right now, so I took a break. But she knew therapy, but she didn't want to be a therapist, she wanted to keep Rolfing.
So how did you guys end up, what's your story of how you guys ended up in Boulder?
Okay, so Ida really wanted 3 schools in her
Right.
mind. She wanted one on the East Coast, and so she was trying to get their Florida group to put together a school on the East Coast. And we were working on it. We found a building in St. Pete, and then she was hoping to have one in California, maybe San Francisco or LA or Big Sur, and then she wanted... Peter had moved here, and Peter was one of her favorites. She was a wonderful Rolfer and a wonderful human being. He's married, and Emmett had moved here first. And Emmett had a big practice, and Emmett had a little house up here in Blueberry, and he and Dick Sensible took care of him. They were sweethearts or roommates, whatever you want to call it. They were actually married. They wore wedding rings.
Mm-hmm.
And, so Ida let Emmett, Dick said, why don't you come out here, I'll organize a class. And because he organized, Ida told him, why don't you teach a class in Boulder? So Emmett did a class in Boulder. I came out for a week. Ida said, it'd be good if there's another Rolfer there for graduation. I didn't even get reimbursed for it, but I thought, okay. So, I flew out, and I didn't do much. I hung around the class, helped out just a little, because it was Emmett's show, and I knew he didn't want me to interfere. If he'd asked me to do something, I'd do it. So I just hung around, and I was there for graduate. I said, you guys had a great training. I was here, but I said, Emmett gave you a great job. I shook everybody's hand. Emmett gave him a certificate. And then Peter moved out here. See, Peter moved out here, or one or the other, I can't remember. Emmett and then Peter. And so Peter was married, had a kid or two, then he came out and had 2 more kids. So they were saying, Dr. Rolf, why don't you come here? We know you love the outdoors. Which, I did too. And so Ida came out here, and Boulder was teeny. You could be in the mountains in 5 minutes. There's a few hippies and a few. The school was much smaller. CU Boulder. This building here, one of these rooms was sort of a dance hall for a while. So Ida loved it. She would bring her grandkids out and take them up to the state park one summer. Because this is great for my grandkids, so she liked being outdoors with her grandkids. They got that train below here, so she had her kids come out, take the train down and back, because she didn't have to, she could enjoy it with them. So Ida liked it here, and so she said, well, we can have a school here. Plus, Peter and Emma were here. They were her first 2 teachers, see? And then I was just assisting. And then she made me a teacher, so I did my first year, and Peter was the assistant, which was kind of goofy. He had much better teaching skills than I had. And so I did said here, so she said, well, we should have 3 schools. She really wanted one Central, East Coast, and West Coast. So her idea was to try to get one back in New York or somewhere there. Philadelphia was fine for her, and then the West Coast. So we had Michael Salison, he was the first teacher in the West Coast. And then Michael assisted her before me, so Michael was assisting when I took the advanced class. And then Sultan was assisting when I was first teaching, so I was actually maybe 6 weeks ahead of Sultan. Sultan sometimes likes to think he taught Ida, but it really didn't work out that way. So
for the schools, I had heard that each school was supposed to be themed, like there was going to be, one was maybe more structural, one was more psychological, and one was...
Yeah, Ida said that it might turn out that way.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't say it should.
Okay.
She said, these people on the West Coast, they really seem to be in the psychotherapy and putting that together, because some of them were.
That makes sense.
There are a lot of Rolfers that trained at Echelon. They were really good at Gestalt. They were really good at running groups, but especially Gestalt and one-to-one. And she said, so it seems like that might be a natural fit for the West Coast. She said, on the East Coast, they're more intellectual or something. She said, so maybe that'll be pure Rolfing. And she said, Boulder's sort of in the middle. Boulder might be a mixture. She didn't say it had to be this or that, but this was her like looking in the future, what might be a natural evolution.
Right.
But correct me if I'm wrong, that there's still the idea that through Ida that Rolfing was never meant to just be purely structural. It is to have these components of psychotherapy or psychology or the somatic
or spirituality, and then the movement aspect.
Ida didn't really want the movement to be separate, but it turned out that way. Mm-hmm. It was so much easier for the movement people. Because if I had a pure movement class, you didn't have guys, starting to stick their elbows and stuff. Look at me, I'll do it this way, And so, I took some early classes with Judith, and I loved them because she just learned how to help people feel their toe hinge. Mm-hmm. You could work on toes forever, but if they can't move their toes like a toe hinge, it doesn't hold up half the time. So I actually went out to LA and took a movement class, and I was a model in one of Ida Judith's classes. People were moving mine, and I went, damn, that's helpful,
Mm-hmm.
Some teachers didn't see it that way. I move tissue, they thought the movement was for women, because Judith had a master's in dance, but I didn't see it that way. Dorothy Nolte was an amazing Rolfer. She was one of Ida's first, And she did some movement, and she did some psychotherapy, but not. It happened in the process. She didn't go lay down, we're going to talk about mom or something.
Yeah.
If it popped up, she could deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes she'd run a group to help you feel yourself more. And the part of feeling yourself was emotional, and that was fine with her. She could be present for that.
Mm-hmm. So then when did you find yourself in Boulder?
Well, like I said, I came out here, I was here for the whole summer of 74.
Mm-hmm.
I spent this summer of 73 in Echelon, Ida. Went back to Florida, and then I was going back and forth to New York a little bit. One of my clients was a guy who wanted to be a Rolfer. His name was Michael Blackburn. He moved to New York and said, man, we could really use some help up here. So I went up to New York. He sent me up. I went up, he got a little room for me, and I was crashing in a little teeny bedroom, that was okay. I was doing 20 people a week, so. And people were like, man, we'd love you to stay here. And Michael, he was busier than he needed to be, so. Anyhow, so I decided to stay there. My dad, I fly down to Florida to see my dad twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
My mom had passed away, so I just wanted to check in on my dad. Anyhow, so the California thing, I'd asked me to go to California, I would. I'd just fly out. I had a Volvo wagon, and once I left it out there, I left it at Chuck Seymour's house. I said, do you mind if I leave my... I had to get back. I didn't want to drive back across country. I left my car with another Rolfer for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't want to just be at Esalen, though. She wanted to be on the West Coast and on the East Coast and the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And she also just liked it, as I said, because she could bring her grandkids out there. And she loved the drives around the mountains.
Right.
It reminded her of her husband. That's when I heard all these stories about Walter.
Mm-hmm. Now I'm curious about what was your draw. Was it just purely teaching to come here and support now becoming the Rolf Institute for you to leave New York to come to Boulder?
I sometimes think that was a mistake when looking, because I had a really good deal there. I had a nice apartment. And no, I came out here, and in the old building, we had a classroom in the front and the back on 4th. And I was teaching in one room, and there was a movement teacher in the bigger room, movement class, and then there was that little bathroom in the middle. And about half the time I come out and I'd see this movement teacher, her name was Jane Harrington. So I went back to New York, and I called her up a couple times and asked her what she was doing, and she said, well, I'm doing this or that. She said, well, I'm making a cook right now. And I'm like, okay. And I called her again, and she said, well, I'm going to be in Boulder, so-and-so. So I came out here and just, got an apartment and tried to act like I was just Rolfing, and then we came up, and then we just got hot and heavy the first time we saw each other.
So you and Jane Harrington hung out?
We had been talking, though, for a year and called her up. I'd love to come out to San Francisco and see you, and then it didn't quite work out. And then I knew her friends, and I was calling her friends up. Get her friend's name, I go, what does she like, what doesn't she like, that kind of thing. And then she had a daughter. I had always wanted to have a kid. And I thought it was like a package deal for me, it was like ice cream and cake, so to speak. So I got to be an instant dad, and she had a really sweet little kid. And so we were trying to figure out where to live. I didn't think her kid would like New York City. I could have been wrong, but it just didn't seem that way. She'd been living in really a sweet part of San Francisco. And I had worked in Tucson. The biological dad lived in Arizona. So I thought, well, maybe why don't we live in Arizona? Your daughter can be close to her biological dad and go back and forth. And Amy, her name's Amy, and she really didn't do well with the heat. She was always like a thermometer. She was always red and
sounds like me.
The same thing.
And then her dad came over, and he's a rodeo rider, and he's always trying to start fights. He loved to fight. I'd have to go to the bathroom and throw water in my face and go, don't do it, and go back out and try to be calm again, And I'd heard he liked to fight, and I'm like, I can't fight this guy. It ruined my daughter. I wasn't afraid of him, but I was like, he wouldn't have worked. You follow me? She couldn't have accepted me as her stepdad. I'm punching out her dad, or he's punching me out. So I learned how to get along with the guy. And
so did you and Jane get married?
Not exactly, but we lived together for quite a while. That was a big mistake of mine. I didn't marry her. I think it pissed her off after a while. We were together, and we started teaching cranials. She saw I was good. People were always coming to the house in Tucson asking me cranial questions.
Okay, so you didn't go from New York to Boulder. You went to New York to Tucson.
And she says, I'm tired of this. You should do a class. So she called these people. She says, Jim's doing a class. Here's the date.
And who did you do your cranial training with?
Just a bunch of people. So I had Jan Davis helped me. She was a Rolfer, but she'd been through the Cranial Academy a bunch of times. So I was doing some cranial work in her. She said, wow, that's messed. She didn't say it was messed up, but it was. She said, you can't work on me anymore. You have to work on my boyfriend. It really wasn't her boyfriend. So I'm working on him. And I finally realized I was too heavy-handed. That's why she didn't let me work on it. So I got lighter and lighter and lighter. So Jan Davis helped me tremendously. My hands were too. I was thinking bones, not membranes and fluids. So then I started taking some classes with Ledger, because he came down. So when he first came to Florida, no one knew who he was. So I went down and got privates from him before he got big. And fly in to see my dad, rent a car, go get a couple of sessions, come back up, fly back to New York.
Were you the person that kind of helped bring him to the Rolf Institute? Because I know he was doing some training at first.
First guy to help him was Charles Swinson. Charles was really wanting to be do cranial, and he really wanted to be a cranial osteopath. I'm trying to remember. So Charles was an anatomy teacher, but he had this good for cranial, a really wonderful guy. And so he moved to Kirksville, Missouri, because that's one of the first osteopathic schools.
Yeah.
And he had a wife, Blanker, named, a really wonderful person. And he said, let's just go there for a year or two. And he signed up for junior college courses because he didn't have a degree yet. And so he got permission to sit in on the cranial class at night. He said, I'm here taking some classes. I work with my hands. So he audited the Kirksville cranial class at night. Everybody else was there at osteopathic. So he noticed most of the people were goofing off. They weren't paying attention. And some guys weren't even showing up for the class. So he go up and he said, this is a brilliant lecture. He said, I loved it. Thanks for letting me sit in here. I'm so honored. And I noticed some of these people aren't taking it seriously. He said, frankly, this is an elective. I can't make these people. We want to get them exposed to it. We're hoping we can set the hook and pull them into cranial. But a lot of them just want to get that medical degree. He said, I can't help that. But I'm hoping someone will get interested like you are. So at some point, Charles, you might be calling Charles, I think. Charles or Charlie, won't even. So he realized that, wow, I don't have to go to school. So the guy let him watch some more. And then the Upledger thing happened, so he went out and helped. Charles was a big, friendly guy, and he started helping Upledger, and so Upledger made him a teacher for a while. And then Charles' wife started teaching a little too. She was really good at cranial. And she had gone through the Rolfing program at some point. And she's a really nice person. I'm embarrassed I can't remember her first name. And so they live up there in La Porta. And he didn't come down much. He was down here, and the politics of the school really turned him off.
For a lot of people.
Yeah. So he was an anatomy teacher for a while, but then he just got tired of the politics and not going back to Boulder again.
So you were saying before about how Jane sort of set you up to start teaching.
Yeah, so she set up a cranial class, and we had about 15 or 20 people, I can't remember. We had a house, had a big living room, and so we decided, and had a big sunroom right next to it, so we decided to do it there. And people really liked it, and so Jane said, we should do this in San Francisco. So she lived in San Francisco getting her master's in dance at Long Mountain, I think. Anyhow, so she called some people who went to San Francisco. The class went really well. People loved it. They wanted to come back for another one. We did another one in the Bay Area, and then we did one in Berkeley. Then we were thinking about moving there. Because Jane liked it there, I liked it there. We started flying out looking for apartments, and then she said, well, now we've got to find schools. And I started talking to people about schools. It turned out some of the schools are really rough. Amy was this little fragile little girl, really kind of thin, and sort of fragile at the time, in my opinion. So I was like, yeah, well. So I said, we got to find the right place for the right school, because some of the schools there were pretty tough. And so we waited a year, and Jane got ticked off about it. She thought I was stalling. I really did well in San Francisco. I loved it. And then we thought about LA. Jane had a good friend named Vivian who wanted us to move to LA. And I didn't think we would do as well in LA. I mean, I thought we'd be busy. But I'd lived in LA before. I don't know. You go to the movies, you got to drive 20 miles, and looking for parking takes you another hour. We had been in Boulder, even in New York City, it was easy. You take the subway downtown, you're at a movie. You go down to the village, and you see a different kind of a movie. New York was easy. New York, even Tucson was easier. LA didn't quite. I knew I could make a living there, but I don't think we'd be happy there.
Right.
Jane's best friend Vivian wants to move there, and Vivian was real busy, and she would send Jane up with all these clients, and she was getting paid more. I said, yeah, you're making more money there, but, it's going to cost us twice as much. I said, I'll make you a deal. You go to LA, you live there for 2 weeks. We'll split the cost, whatever. But you're not staying at Vivian. Vivian had this house up in the damn mountains. It was incredible. Her boyfriend had this huge hot tub, redwood hot tub, surrounded by trees. It was it's worth multi-millions now. I'm like, we can't live there. We can't afford to live up in the canyon area. We'll be living in Santa Monica. We're lucky, I said, you live in Santa Monica for 2 weeks, I'll move. You'll hear nothing from me. I'll pack up and we'll go there. Again, I knew I could make the money there, but I didn't know if we'd be happy there. And I didn't think the schools in LA would be good for me. I really didn't. So we had a little disagreement about that. And it is Jane's kid, so she didn't like me telling her. And I'm not saying I was a better parent, just my own thing. So
you don't mess with mama and the kids.
Yeah. She went out to LA. She's all right. I'm going to drive out there and work. I'm out in my car. And she went there 4 days, Santa Monica. She called me up. She said, people are crazy, right? And I told her, here's the deal. You're not going to live with Vivian. You'll get up every morning. Imagine you're driving the kid to school. Drive the kid to school and come back. I don't care what you do the rest of the day. But around 3 or 4 o'clock, imagine you got to pick the kid up to take her to a dance lesson or something. I said, you have no idea what LA traffic's like. Because Vivian's set up so we never experienced the traffic. We always traveled on off hours. And I'm like, yeah, you're used to going in there at 10:30. That's not their usual traffic pattern. So I said, at 5 o'clock, imagine you got to pick her, 4:30, you got to pick the kid up and take her somewhere. Jane was there 3 days, called back. She said, it's crazy here. I want to come home. I don't want to be here for 2 weeks. 3 or 4 days. I said, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So she realized the living there was different than living up in the hills with Vivian. So I can't remember if that was before or after. Then we came up here. I met this really wonderful osteopath in Ohio who had studied with some amazing osteopath. So I called him up and said, we'd love to bring you to Boulder to teach. You'll love it. And I said, we just have a small cranial class. Everybody there will be really nice to you. You'll get to go hiking. I said, you'll be 10 blocks from these beautiful mountains. And I described the Flatirons. And I said, I guarantee you'll be up in the Flatirons after every evening, hiking and loving it, and we'll set you up with this and that. So the guy came out here for a 2-day cranial, and I made sure he got his hiking in and so forth. And we brought the kid up, Amy, and it was a totally different person. She was happy, she was laughing, she was running around like she was on drugs or something. I mean, she wasn't. I mean, she was just so happy. It was unbelievable. And I realized the Tucson heat wasn't for her, and the Arizona heat wasn't for her, and she'd done well in San Francisco as a child, So I went, let's move to Boulder. Look how happy this kid is. And Jane went, yeah, let's move to Boulder.
Okay.
So we moved up here and it worked out great. We got her in a little grammar school up here. She had friends immediately. And we realized we needed a bigger place so she could have friends over, the old sleepover thing. Mm-hmm. And her grades, she just flourished up here. Mm-hmm. Her grades kept up. She liked school again. I still know 2 or 3 of her friends. When I see them go, hey, Honor, they go, hey, Mr. Asher, So, one little girl named was Sarah. She came over. Our house was right up, there was an alley that turned into a trail right up on Marine, behind Marine.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
It was a cute little house, and this girl named, Sarah would come over and she'd say, Mr. Asher, can we go up hike a little bit? And I said, sure. Her husband was a trail guide. Her dad, not her husband. So I'd say, call Honor up. Honor was slightly overweight, but really bright. She had a photographic memory. I said, take Honor with you. So sometimes Donna would go, some she would. But they go up these little hikes, and so my daughter fell in love with hiking. And after a while, she was telling me, I don't like these talks we're having. Let's go for a hike and then talk. So I go, okay. And then we got her a mountain bike. That's when women's bikes. At first, it was mostly men's bikes. So I got her a little bike that fit her, and she loved biking.
So is this the daughter that you were talking about before we started our interview, where you had to get your own office because?
Yeah. So I had a home office, and everybody kept coming in the house to meet her. And go, are you going to be a Rolfer? And she's, why do I have to be a Rolfer? I said, you don't have to be a Rolfer. You're going to be an artist, be anything you want to be. But people asked her, and she was like,
well, there's more context to that now, too, that her mother was Jane Harrington. Too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But Jane was mostly doing movement at first. She was trying to make it as a movement teacher and prove that she didn't have to be a Rolfer. She had a little chip on her shoulder. I can help people with movement. She did. She helped a lot of people with movement.
I was in a class with Jane.
She's an amazing teacher.
Yeah.
She really helped my teaching skills. She's a much better teacher than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I would watch her. How the hell did she get that? She could turn the classroom real quick, in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so in that way it worked out good. The kid was happier. Jane was happier for the most part.
What was the Rolf Institute in Boulder yet, or was it?
Yeah, we were here, and we had a building on 4th, a little brick building. And behind it was a bigger classroom. So we had a little classroom up front. It's got a kind of a patio outside of it, and it had a skylight.
Is this isn't the same building that's on Canyon that's next to the gas station or the car wash?
No.
Not the ones with the beams in the middle of the classroom?
Yeah, no. That was our second building.
I trained in that second building.
Yeah, our first building was on Pearl, on 4th. A little teeny brick building, and then it had a little teeny upstairs, and that's where Dick's building office was at first. And then behind that was a bathroom. It didn't have enough bathrooms. I kept telling Dick, it would be real simple to put a second bathroom in there. Dick just didn't. It was hard to get him to do the damn thing. It would have been simple to put a ladies' room in that second. It was a small hallway that had been, plumbing you could back up easy, you just make room, This be so simple.
So what was your involvement, with the Rolf Institute? Besides teaching, did you have much more involvement with the Rolf Institute?
Well, I mostly helped Ida,
Mm-hmm.
so that created some conflicts. I wasn't helping Ida to get ahead. I was a teacher, and I didn't even try to be a teacher. Ida made me a teacher. And I'm like, okay. And Peter and Matt I saw them as my elders.
So did you teach all of the, at the time, well, I guess even back maybe when you were you doing the auditing and the...
Yeah, I did an auditing and in those days you taught both.
Mm-hmm.
You taught a practitioner and auditing. You taught practitioners and auditors audited. And then at some point we realized auditors they really weren't being taken care of. So we decided to split it up. And it was much better for them.
Mm-hmm.
They were always treated as second-class students.
Yeah.
People would say, hey, would you put my sheet on my table for me? That would be mean.
Yeah.
So, I was in the faculty, so was Peter, Emmett were the first. Then I was probably number 3. And then I felt like we needed more women. So I had Stacy, I helped her, and then I helped Gail. And I had a couple other women assist, and some of them really weren't set. And we had another woman, probably the 6th teacher was Tom. And we had another woman that I had brought in. Her name was Caroline Widmer. She was a tall woman. And Carol would have been a teacher. She had her first basic, though, and she'd gone to India to meditate. Everybody's telling her she needed to be more chill. She can be a little stern occasionally. And she just thinks I'll go to India and meditate just before my class. Come in, I'll be smooth, She picks up parasites. Well, you don't know it for a while. she's teaching and she's not feeling good. So occasionally she'd open up a table and she'd lay down because parasites can hurt you in one place or the other, especially your liver. And she's teaching. And we had one guy, he thought he should be a teacher. I'm not going to name his name. And he started bad-mouthing her, saying, why is she laying down and this and that and the other. She had no idea she was going to have parasites in the middle of the class. And it's sad that, it's too bad if could have given her more support. Like, Carol, could we come in and help you? Or why didn't she call Peter or me? Or how can we help you?
Right.
Not take over, not displace her, And I don't know why she didn't think of it, and maybe we didn't give her that message. Like putting it all on her. And I always feel like we should have done more for her. There was rumors that the class wasn't going well.
Yeah.
And so she got really hurt by it. She was damaged by it. It's just not right.
Mm-mm.
So, sorry, she was just really bad, I thought. Because I would go see her later and I could tell I said, I'm sorry about your class. So anyhow, she would have been a teacher with another lady named Marcia or Martha. And she would have been the 5th or 6th teacher. So it was Peter Nemeth, then myself, and then Michael Salveson. Michael was right before me, then me, and then Salveson was after. Salveson, myself, and then Sultan. And then Ida told us to start making teachers. She didn't like the pressure to pick people. So we had Peter Nemeth, really liked this girl named Martha, tall, thin woman. She moved back to Vermont because her mom was sick. She did a basic. I don't know who the assistant was. It could have been Tom, for all I remember, but I always started the class having you say, what is Rolfing? And you have to start on Rolfing of so-and-so. And then Ida would interrupt and take off on a lecture. So Martha decided that Ida thought this was a good idea to start off with this question. So every day she would start the question off, what is Rolfing? She'd say, why don't you give us 5 minutes on what do you think Rolfing is? You might not have been prepared. You go, and then next day she'd point to someone else. So a lot of people didn't like this. And one guy in the class wanted to be a teacher. So he was like, I wouldn't teach that way. And he kind of, in those days, there was a lot of backbiting by some people who thought they should be the teacher or something.
Well, I think there still is so much these days, too.
Could be. So she didn't like it. She felt like she'd busted her butt and was, getting a lot of grief over one little thing the first 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then her mom got sick, so she moved back to Vermont. Then Caroline came into the class, same thing. She had parasites. She didn't plan it. So that would have been 2 women right off the bat that would have been the first 8. You follow me? Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I had Stacy come assist me. Stacy was wonderful, and I'd worked with her in Hawaii. So Stacy taught for a while, but she didn't always get the best class, so they had her teach one in New York, but it went well. But unfortunately, the classroom was in a noisy part of the city where they drop off a lot of stuff, and trucks are constantly honking in the morning. But when you got to the place, no one thought, let's go there at 9 o'clock in the morning, right. It was like. So people said they loved Stacy, but they couldn't hear her every time because she had a very soft voice. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of, we were hoping to have that school in New York, and then we had another class in the East Coast, same thing, was going to be in D.C., and students didn't like the area it was in. It was rough or something. I don't know. I didn't go to that one.
So, Jim, you have such a wonderful, rich history that you're sharing with us about Ida personally, her teachings, the schools, and if you wouldn't mind taking the liberty, if there is 2 things. If there was reflecting on the whole of the history of the development of the Rolf Institute, what do you think the lesson that you wish that the Rolf Institute has learned or will learn, and what do you think the future of the Rolf Institute should be?
the future. I think that we could have not had the split if a couple of people hadn't gotten uppity about it. We could have healed it quickly because Peter didn't really want to split, but some people were. His wife was talking to Dick on the phone. She worked for us. They were like, "Why is Susan talking to Dick?" Well, they were friends. Like you had your best friend all of a sudden was working somewhere else. Let's say you worked at IBM and all of a sudden your best friend's at Hewlett Packard, you'd still talk to him occasionally.
Of course.
They didn't think Susan should talk to Dick. And he would call her up. She didn't want to hang up on him. And then people were giving her a hard time. And Peter said, "Why are you giving my wife a hard time? That's just not right." That's why he left. People were giving his wife a hard time. So we didn't learn something there. You know, we should have said, okay, we got to treat people better. People can work for us, but we can't determine who their friends are. I don't know, it was kind of silly, and we were too tight. Now it's kind of more relaxed, and we realize there are other schools out there, and we can't be this, can't be as rigid.
I think depending who you talk to.
Okay.
Depending who you talk to.
But I think, the school is going well. I still think, we need, what happens here is, of course, the whoever's in charge of the institute, the director, of course, feels like we always have financial things, so they're afraid to give classes to California or the East Coast. Because they're afraid of losing revenue. Not for themselves, but the class always, to keep that thing, you have to have revenue. And so in the early days, we had more fundraising, and I think part of these fractions between people, there is less fundraising. Like I once found a millionaire who loved Rolfing, and I took him down to Ida's birthday party. He wanted me to drive, brand new Porsche. He said, "I want you to drive my Porsche back." It was like midnight. I said, "It's kind of late." "No, you're driving." It was like the best Porsche on the road. You couldn't have bought a more expensive Porsche. Right, and he just wanted to reward me for taking me to his birthday party. And he gave some money. I raised some money from him. I said, "Jim Oshman has this research project." He said, "Is he going to do it? Is he a good man?" I said, "Well, to be honest, he can get distracted. He's a brilliant scientist." He said, "Well, I want to meet him and talk to him." So this millionaire took the time out, took Jim up to this famous research place in Woods Hole. And Jim, he said, "Let's go to the library." This guy got a PhD from Columbia, I think. Anyhow, his basic degree was, he was Phi Beta Kappa in physics, and then he decided to get a PhD in English to get out of the draft. But he said, "I noticed you have a lot of friends. You're talking all the time. And I'm not going to pay for that. I will pay you, Jim says you can do good fascial research, but I'm going to pay you for 6 weeks and I have to see results. But here's what I'm going to do for you." He said, "I've already gone to the library. I've gotten you a desk on the 3rd floor. You can pay for a desk ahead of time, and it's your desk. You can leave your books there. He said, you need to be in the 3rd floor away from people, or you'll be gabbing all day. I'm not paying for that." And then Jim called me up and said, "This guy doesn't want to talk." I said, "He wants you to be a successful researcher, which you used to be." And he's right. You do talk too much. I'm the same way. So his name was Myron, and he said that he's a good guy, but he's got to be kept away from his friends. He said, "Have breakfast, do your research. At 6 o'clock, I don't care who you talk to. And I'm going to pay you X number of dollars, and I expect to see something done in 3 weeks and something done in 6 weeks." But Myron went up there and checked it out on his own. He didn't have to. And so Jim did a really good job on fascia. And we just needed more of that. And Myron wanted to teach an anatomy class. I said, "Let's set this guy up. He'll be the assistant anatomy teacher." "No, he hadn't done this, he hadn't done that." I said, "He's done other things. He just wants to teach at one time. He will never come back. He's got a wife and 2 daughters. His wife's a psychiatrist. He's got he had a money management. He had his own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I said, just let him teach this one. He didn't have to teach it. He can co-teach it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to do it. It was that rigidity again. And Myron wasn't trying to be a teacher, you know.
Yeah. So you're saying then
We've had a few people that way. They wanted help Rolfing, but they wanted something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want to be crowned a king or queen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes we put up these roadblocks that stop us from, you know, we've had a few other people want to get money, but they, you know, it's like if you give money at church, eventually you'd like to see your name on the one glass window or something. I don't know. But I don't know. I felt like that's just one example, and then we had some. I know another guy. He was teaching. He did this. He did all kinds of work for Ida. And one teacher started spreading rumors around about him. This guy, his girlfriend had broken up with him. She went to another town and was getting some Rolf and started complaining, you know. He's seen other girls or something. It was an unfair comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I know 3 or 4 people that did a lot of work for the school, and then they got shut off to the side because of one little thing or one person didn't like him. Mm-hmm. One said, "Oh, he's a party boy." I said, "He didn't party more than you do," you know. Mm-hmm. But the guy complained about his party. You mean, it wasn't like the guy was a drunk, you know. He didn't party that much. So I think we're sometimes too tough on people, and then we've held people out. We're too.
The motto is we hold to higher standards, but I don't know if necessarily we hold ourselves to higher standards as well.
Yeah, I felt as a standard, it was a double standard, you know. So I've known a couple of people who probably could have, like I said, Tom West was a psychologist. He wanted to start a school in St. Petersburg. He even found a building. It was a historical building. And he had me come down and look at it. The living room would have been great for a classroom, and the dining room would have been great for a classroom. I think I showed it to Susan Yelker or somebody. And I said, this would be a great classroom, and it was historical, so you had to leave the outside alone. And upstairs had some bedrooms, so you couldn't mess them up. The students could stay up there. And did have a little kitchen. And St. Pete in those days was easy to find rooms for rent. So we could have a classroom there in a cheap building. Mm-hmm. So again, a couple people really didn't want one person, I'm not going to name names, but said, I don't want to teach in Florida. It's hot and sweaty. I'm like, no, you don't have to go, you know. Who said you were going to be the teacher, you mean? I wouldn't do it for myself, though. So there was a free classroom right there. And even if we shut it down later, you told me we could turn around and sold the building.
Right.
So it's on historically where the school has dealt with some egos and grudges.
Yeah, egos. I mean, when we try to expand, there's always someone who doesn't like something about it.
Right.
You know. We could have, you know, a long time ago, the Canadian group was hoping we'd have a school up there. Mm-hmm. They would come down and they would take me out lunch. What do you think about school? And I'm all for it.
I think there's a group up there that's opening back up. They're not fully associated.
Yeah, but look, this was, not to interrupt you, but
very good.
15, 20 years ago, we had some people really pushing for a school up there. Now, there is a school of connective tissue work in Canada, and they 3-4 years ago, they flew Robert Schleip over to give a lecture for him. We had an annual meeting here 5 years ago. He stopped up and said, Robert, how come you're not here longer? So I don't mean to. He said, Jim, I'm only here. The Rolf Institute wouldn't pay for my flight. He said, I'm only here because the Canadian Connective Tissue Association flew me in for a lecture. And I said, is it okay if I stop in Denver on the way back? And they said, sure. So he said, they flew me to wherever it was, Calgary. And then he stopped in Boulder, gave us a lecture for free at our annual meeting, and then he flew home. And then I said, he felt like he was gone for his wife too much. He has a wonderful wife, and she does filling price work. So I went out to the East Coast. I said, why don't you and I teach a class, or you could teach it in Atlanta. I said, there's a big airport there. You could bring your wife over, and she could do some Rolfing movement, some movement. Because he didn't like being away from his wife all the time. So I said, we could do a split of 3 and a 5 instead of a 3 and a 3. Only so we'd have 5 days on, 2 days off, 5 days on. Then you go back to Germany. And if you want your wife to come over here, she can enjoy Atlanta. And if not, then we'll come back a second time. Then it'll be...
Did the class happen?
No. I put it out to the faculty. They're like, well, I don't know. I said, look, we need to pull Robert. He's done all this research. I had invited him to the first low back pain conference. It was in Vienna. I said, you should come to this conference, man. I'll be there. He showed up. He saw all these people presenting papers. And he said, God, this is great. I could do a paper. He went home, did that thing, started presenting papers. And he brought his brother. His brother was a doctor, children's doctor, a pediatrician, I think. I got to meet his brother for the first time. Robert said, this is a place where I can get published. Every time Robert wrote an article for the Rolf lines, there was 1 or 2 people who criticized him. Robert Schleip should have used this language. The Latin word for this is that. The Greek word for the Latin. Robert goes, I know Greek and Latin, but I'm just writing in English. I'm like, he's German for God's sake. English is his third language, not his first. Here in Germany, you learn Italian, you learn, yeah. So again, they were being tough on Robert. One guy was like, I don't like the way he writes this article. Who cares what you think? Keep it yourself, I mean, it's okay to be negative, but you don't be negative in public.
Right.
And now Robert's one of the most honored,
recognized
all over the world. Robert Schleip, recognized for his research.
And many people don't know he's a Rolfer.
Yeah.
No,
because he doesn't say it as much.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to leave it here, but I have an appointment I have to run to.
That's fine.
2:30.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go so long.
No, it's
great.
This is great. What I would say, if possible, I'll be back, because this is, I know, just the tip of the iceberg. I'll be back in Boulder this summer for another Rolf Movement Intensive, and maybe we can have another sit down.
Sure, I'm here most of the summer. I'm teaching us a workshop on the East Coast. But I'm just here. I'm gone for a week. So I'm teaching with Ellen.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. It's at this farm. It's this beautiful farm, and it's an old barn downstairs, and so it's a big kitchen. They cook all the meals, and they're a bunch of happy hippies. They meditate. They're a big meditation group. It's got a big, amazing breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You couldn't ask for better food. If you're allergic to something, they cook especially for you. They go for gin, no onions, or bill, no this or that. And then there's another huge room for a classroom, so people bring tables. And outside there's some horses running around, and it's actually in the country. And then the people who run the place are meditators, so they'd like to be models, but they don't have to be, Upstairs, everybody has their own little bedroom, So anyhow, I'm here except for that one time.
Well, closer to the time, I'll reach back out to you. I've learned that email is not the way for you. So
call me, I'm better.
I'll call you.
I probably look at my email once a year, but I don't like computers, to be honest. When I get home, when I get off work, I want to go on a walk or swim. I love to swim. Anyhow.
Well, thank you so much for taking time with this chat, and it was such.
I'm actually happy to talk about Ida. She was, like I say, a great person.
Yeah.
I just finished up Alan. As I told you, Alan wound up marrying a Rolfer. See, Dick was a Rolfer and a chiropractor, but he had 4 boys, but his wife put on a lot of weight. And so after a while, I don't know, they had difficulties, you know. And she wasn't a bad person. And then they moved to Switzerland. He had promised her he'd move her to Switzerland when Ida died. And I don't know, they did better over there. But then his other son just was like, no, Mom, I'm not helping you. Mom, I'm going to be an engineer like Dad. Alan wanted to be like Dad, who was an engineer, and like his grandpa, who was an engineer. Well, Ida couldn't argue with that. Okay, your dad's an engineer.
Could have been like, I'm an engineer of the body.
Yeah. And her mom was an engineer. You know, Ida's dad was an engineer, so she was happy that he was going to be an engineer. You know? So Alan married, he did marry, his second wife was a Rolfer. He had a wife, and he had 2 kids, and one of that daughter became a cranial person. Ida brought her out one day. She introduced her name was Francine. She said, she's going to probably be a cranial sacral or cranial osteopath someday. Sure as heck, the girl went to Kirksville and became an osteopath. And then I don't know what the other grandkids do. And then Alan remarried, married a girl named Josie Baluzzi. Anyhow.
Are any of the sons still alive?
So that's the last of it. So Joy had a kid with Alan. And when he married, he said, I don't want kids. And I said, tell Alan anything. He's a pup. He's a pushover. He just likes to act tough. I said, once you're married, believe it or not, he is in love with you and he will lay down for you. You know, whatever you say goes. He just has these little crazy ideas. So, you know, they got married. He's like, whatever, you know. They had a boy. And that kid is like Ida. That's the end of the story. That kid has got his PhD. He flies to England, some famous school over there, Oxford. He's done research over there in physiology and sciences, anyhow. And then he flies back to the East Coast and does research on the East Coast. And because they both of them want him, he's sort of a conduit for whatever he's researching. But he's got the Ida brain. Not everybody has that. You know, sometimes you inherit a brain more than just a body. You know?
Yeah.
And so he's got that brainy part that wants to do research like the grandma did. I've met him once or twice. He's a nice guy. Anyhow, that's my last story.
That was a great story.
Yeah, we'll have more much later
I'll
on.
let you guys go walk out so I don't start talking.
Thanks for listening to us at Touching Into Presence. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. You can find out more about Jim at rolfingjimasher.wordpress.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you'd leave a positive review of the podcast and subscribe to it through the platform of your choice. When you do this, it really helps other people find us, and we greatly appreciate your support. We look forward to hearing back from you and seeing you on our next conversation at Touching Into Presence. Bye-bye.